Okay, so we're kind of heading into the end of this. We figured out how to cut stuff up, how to like change things around, how to add titles, a whole bunch of options that we've kind of messed with here. And one thing you might want to do, the last thing you might want to do is you might want to layer two clips over the top of each other and change their opacity and some of those things. So one thing you could think about doing is just grabbing something like a piece of footage here and just put it on the track above the one that we just edited. And you can see now, like if I look at this like that, this new piece of footage I just put down completely covers what's underneath. I can toggle that on and off with the eyeball here, right? But it's just basically like covering up the layer that's underneath. And probably what I'm going to want to do is go in here and go to Control, click again. I'm going to want to unlink these. I'm going to delete that. So I just have my just a video, but not any of the sound, right? That came along with it. And I can just change all the opacity of it by just clicking on this button and this line, and the line will change basically the opacity of the whole layer, so that entire clip that I'm putting on there. So that could be one way to do it, but you may just want to have some parts kind of fade in and out. So there's this kind of cool way you can do that over here in the opacity button. So again, if you click on select with the black arrow tool, select your layer or your clip you want to mess with. And then go into effects controls. So if you need to click on the effects controls, you can do that. You can also go to window, effects controls, and it'll bring it up. These are the effects that are kind of in there. And if you twirl down on this, you can see that there's all these options for us to change the opacity. So right now it's set at 76.5%. And if I just click this little button right here, which is a keyframe button, which is what you would recognize if you've used After Effects before, it's going to drop like a little tiny line and a little spot in there, just a little button. And then if I just crank that down to 0, it's going to drop that whole line down to 0 opacity, right? But if I'm rolling along and I really want it to kind of ramp up, so it's 100% here, I can add another keyframe, and I can crank that up, and you'll see that it just kind of ramped that whole keyframe up for me. And so, if I want, I can just even use just a timeline here and just drag it down and say, okay, I want it to be like 70% here. I want to add another keyframe to hold it at 70%, and then I want to drop it back down to 0 here. So you just click on another keyframe and then zip it down. You can see how we kind of made a little ramp there where that drone went over the top of the other one. So that could be one way to do it. If I want to make sure it's 100% at a certain point, I could do that. It'll ramp up and then ramp down. You can kind of hold it at a certain point. It's really up to you how you handle all that stuff. So that's one way to kind of mess with it. The other way is if you look up here, you'll see there's this underneath the opacity kind of controls where the keyframes live and all of that. And you can actually see where the keyframes are here. If you zoom in on it, you can see where it's adding them in for that particular clip. There's also the blending mode. So if you click here, you can do stuff like multiply is a great one for just knocking out a white background. So what multiply does is basically deletes all of the white pixels out of your image. So if I wanted to, I could kind of almost make it look like that drone is like in the background of those of these guys while they're sitting here doing their thing, just by hitting the multiply button. But I could also do stuff like color burn, which is going to change. It's going to there's a lot of things. These are kind of like effects, and that you want to think about kind of what you're doing and why. The color dodge, there are all these different things you can do that will, again, change what this top layer is doing to the layer underneath it. And so, sometimes people find this stuff to be useful to play around with. Most of the time, people just use they just kind of use the opacity sort of effects, right? And so you can see as that layer goes away, so do the effects that come along with that top layer. So, yeah, something to think about. You can totally play around with that and mess with it as much as you want to. There's a lot of different, tons of secrets hidden deep inside of here. And if you don't like something or you want to change it, you can always just like select a keyframe and delete it, and it'll get rid of that keyframe. And then if you want to, you could just delete all the keyframes out of here and just go back to having your having the whole thing just be normal, where you just change the whole entire clip. And if you don't like the blending mode, just go back to normal, and it'll be back to normal again. So So that's again, that's some real basic sort of stuff with layering over the top. You can do that with sound as well. So you can see all the soundtracks that you have in here, which we'll mess with sound next.